And it'll be available on the KWBAE YouTube channel, which, by the way, has a ton of really great content. So please check that out. There's also a handout that we will email to everyone that's registered. Now, so we're here to talk about what a successful real estate agent in the Bay Area, and especially in Santa Clara County, should know about immigration. We want you to have the knowledge and the skills to better serve our community and do better business. So thank you for being here. And Connor, if I could get my second slide, please. Thank you. So while I give a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today, I just want to invite, oh, the one before that. Oh, just kidding. I guess there was one before that. Okay, so while I give a quick overview of what we're going to be covering, I invite you to share in the comments what brought you here today, what interested you about this topic, and what you're hoping to learn or walk away knowing. So while you do that, our program is incredible today. We have the brilliant Christy Navarez, who will get us familiar with the immigration process and highlight some of the changes that we've seen and are expecting in the future. She's going to focus on the impact on jobs and on real estate. This should provide a basic foundation of knowledge and possibly help identify any looming pitfalls you could see in a transaction, or even as you are building a client relationship. There will be a Q&A after Chrissy speaks. So as she's going, type her comments in and I will gather them and ask her. Also during the Q&As, we have our own Daniel Chalk with Cal Financial, who'll be here to give a lending perspective. We're so glad to have him. Our second speaker after that is the talented Teresa Castellanos. She brings a deeper perspective on the immigration population in our communities and the local resources and services that are available here. And finally, we'll end with a discussion on best practices and scripts and how you can implement this, all of this wealth of important information that we have, and apply it into your business. And just a quick reminder, California has the Unrest Civil Rights Act, which prevents discrimination based on immigration status. So, okay, now the next slide. As we get started, I want you to remember that nearly 39% of the population of Santa Clara County is foreign born. That is the second highest of the major cities in the United States. 64% of them live in households with citizens, and 48% of immigrants are citizens. Immigrants make up 50% of the labor force of Silicon Valley and receive 41% of the household income in Santa Clara County. And so on the next slide, immigrants contribute a staggering $21 billion, which is 44% of the entire region's GDP. So, I mean, it's just really important to understand this, because immigration in our community, it just makes up the core of who we are and who we work with. And our goal is for you to be able to serve them better and serve them with confidence. So with so much gratitude to my fellow organizers, our office, and speakers who've been so generous with their time and contributions, and for you for being here, let's go ahead and begin. Take it away, Salsa.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to first introduce Christy Navarez. Christy comes to us from Fragomen Worldwide, which is recognized as the world's leading corporate immigration services provider. She's a partner with the firm Silicon Valley office, where she serves as corporate immigration counsel to businesses as it pertains to immigration. Prior to joining Fragomen, Christy served as congressional assistant and immigration policy advisor to Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren here in San Jose. We are so honored to have her here with us today, Christy. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to educate us on the matter. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as elegantly as I can, which may not be very. Give me 1 second here. Okay, are you seeing my full slide view here? great. Okay, so this crowd loves statistics, as I heard with the introduction with Shivanji. So that's great. I probably don't have to hit you over the head with these numbers, but one of my colleagues, actually, when I worked with Congresswoman Lofgren, was testifying in front of the House and had this quote: although immigrants made up just 13.7% of the US population, they made up almost 30% of all new entrepreneurs in the US that year. Now, this data is a little bit stale, but I think from a just percentage wise, that holds true. My old boss, Congresswoman Lofgren, always used to say, you know, she was really happy that Sergey Brin from Google was able to find his way through employment-based immigration here in the US. When you think about businesses that could be setting up shop outside of the United States, and just from an economic perspective, how that would affect the US is pretty staggering. I know Teresa is going to talk about a different aspect of immigration, and most people probably think, when they think of immigration, you know, the family-based immigration. It's often in the news over the last few years with DACA, with the unaccompanied child issues that have been going on. This is this part that I want to talk about is on the employment-based immigration side. It's something that I've been practicing for a number of years, and I think, you know, as was said in the introduction, here in Silicon Valley, this is a big piece of your constituency. So I wanted to just start off with some of the changes you may have heard about in the news, and how this is affecting foreign nationals, your potential clients here in the US right now. This 2020 has been quite a year. Most immigration attorneys have a perpetual headache for the last 3.5 years, but certainly this last year has come with a lot of challenges. And starting early this year in February, well, actually just starting even 3.5 years ago, this administration's very first executive order was restricting travel. That was the first act of this administration, came to be known as the Muslim travel ban. And so we've been kind of holding our breath all, you know, throughout this time for other presidential proclamations on travel. And this year started with a travel ban for foreign nationals coming from China, and putting a quarantine period before they could come into the US. This was right at the beginning of COVID-19. A few months later, in April, we heard about this late the night before via tweet, and that tweet just created a lot of anxiety and unrest with the foreign nationals here, because it wasn't exactly clear what the proclamation was going to say the next day, who it was going to affect, how long it would be in effect. But it came out, and for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot of teeth to this April proclamation. It really only suspended people that were getting their green card through a process called consular processing. So they were processing their green card from outside of the United States. It's very rare to do that these days on the employment-based front. So we kind of took a sigh of relief in April when that came out and said, okay, that's not as bad as we were expecting. But then just a couple of months later in June, another proclamation came out, and this did have quite a significant effect on the companies in Silicon Valley. This is regarding also entry. It's really just an entry ban, and it's going till the end of the year. But for everyone who is in either H, L, or J status, if they were not present in the United States when this proclamation went into effect on June 24th, and if they didn't have a valid travel document, so either a visa stamp, and we'll talk about that in a minute, or an advanced parole travel document, then they were subject to this restriction until the end of the year. Now, probably the most common visa type for Silicon Valley companies is the H-1B. So if someone was outside of the US, maybe they departed the US, you know, earlier in the year because of COVID, they wanted to be with their family outside of the US. If they didn't have a valid travel document, they are now stuck. So that global economy, global migration that a lot of the companies rely on here have been feeling the effects of this, you know, over the last month, certainly. the big issue that I wanted to make sure you were aware of is that in this June proclamation, at the very end of the proclamation, there was an addendum that said that this administration wanted the various government agencies to look at how immigration was adversely affecting U.S. citizens, U.S. workers, with particular emphasis on the H-1B and on the employment-based second and third preference, or EB2, EB3 green cards. And so right after that, the government came out with their regulatory agenda for the rest of the year. And there were some things that we are now anticipating, maybe even in the next couple of days or weeks, for the government to propose new regulations. The biggest being, well, maybe not the biggest, but the most talked about being the immigration filing fee. So just to kind of give you some context, right now for a company to file an H-1B, filing fees are about $3,500 per petition. Early, maybe 6 weeks ago, when we first started to hear that this regulation was getting some legs, the proposed filing fee that they were discussing is $100,000 per petition. From $3,500. So you can see from companies' perspective, their immigration program would be decimated, frankly, for this. Now, over the last few weeks, we have heard numbers going anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. There's, nobody really knows except for a very tight circle that is, proposing this, but there certainly will be an increase in fees, and that will affect companies who are sponsoring foreign nationals for jobs in the United States. They're also going to look at what the H-1B program entails. What are the requirements of that program? As well as looking on the ability for the spouses of H-1 employees, which are H-4s. They have a right to get an employment authorization document, or an EAD card, if the principal spouse is far enough along in the green card process. For you, that's important because potentially your clients might be going from a 2-income household to a single income household. And that could be a big deal from a qualification perspective as well. So I'm going to send these slides to Celsa so you can use them to refer to later. But those were the two major things that I wanted to give you just a little bit of a heads up on that may be impacting your clients going forward. There's also a travel ban in general from COVID-19 that has been changing over the last few months, with different countries having that same quarantine ban that China had in February. Other countries added to the list is Iran, the Schengen area, UK, Ireland, Brazil. It's a very fluid list. We tell foreign nationals to check the Fragaman website to get updates on this before finalizing any travel plans. And also the US, Canada, and US, Mexico travel restrictions are there for the land borders through August 20th. This has been extended 3 different times. It doesn't affect flights to and from Canada and Mexico and the US, but it does affect travel through land borders. And the way that this is written, it says only essential workers are allowed to travel through the land borders, and depending which time of day and which Customs and Border Protection officer you're speaking to, whether it's a Tuesday and someone's grouchy or not, that's defining what an essential worker is. And so we're getting very, very inconsistent results with that. So you do have to be aware of those issues that are coming through. Again, you'll be able to use this as a guide and as a tool just to look at, but I highlighted the most popular visa types that you may be seeing in your world, and just some of the things to look out for. And so, so everybody here knows this is like a half-day seminar that we give to our new client contacts. So 5 minutes or less, just to kind of take a look at some of the big ones. The 2 on the left, the F1 students and the TN workers under the NAFTA Free Trade Agreement, those are temporary workers that cannot have the intent to live in the United States permanently. So just an issue to kind of flag for you if you have a client that's on an F1 or a TN, the longevity of the work permit may be something that your lenders are taking a look at. The next two here, the H's and the L's, while they still are temporary work permits, they do have more longevity. You can intend to be here temporarily as an H-1B, but at the same time intend to get a green card. And that's true for both the H and the L. So it gives you more, you know, a better idea of permanence here, which of course is going to be important for your lenders to know. And we'll talk about documentation that Fragaman helps to provide for the employees of our clients as well. The O1 workers, kind of on the high end of the spectrum. These are, you know, in the regs, it says if you've won a Nobel Prize, you qualify for this. It does also say, or, you know, the following 10 different areas, you have to pick at least 3 of those. But these are your PhDs with patents and publications, international awards. Again, this is a group that can't have permanent intent to be here. So just kind of a quick issue to flag. On the H-1B, there is a lot more flexibility. If the company has agreed to sponsor the foreign national for a green card and they get far enough along in the process, that H-1B is renewable forever. So even though statutorily there's a 6-year limit, the exceptions to that 6-year limit are very, very helpful, especially again when you're looking to buy a house here and want some permanence. This is again is a kind of a Reader's Digest version of the stages of permanent residency. This first stage of the process, called PERM, or a labor certification, it's processed by Department of Labor, and companies have to make an attestation to Department of Labor that they have searched for able, willing, qualified, and available U.S. workers, and only when they can say that they haven't found any can they ask Department of Labor to certify this role for a foreign national. It's held pretty true with Department of Labor that for high-tech skilled workers, it's difficult to find U.S. workers. You know, all of my friends, for example, we all graduated with English majors or sociology majors. There weren't a whole lot of my friends who had engineering degrees, and that really hasn't changed over the years. So the high-tech employees are certainly more in demand. And when you look at the numbers at, you know, the technical universities, it's always a staggering number of foreign nationals that are there. We just don't have U.S. workers in the same amount of numbers that are in the high-tech computer science, you know, engineering type fields. It's not an easy process to get this green card. And it's not a fast process to get this green card, which is why you may be seeing some anxiety from your clients as they're going through this process, primarily because this whole thing is focused on a particular job in a particular location for a particular employer. Now, they have some freedom and flexibility to move employers at the next stage of the process, but if they've started and committed in a particular job location in a role, but now they want to buy a house in a different area, the risk to them is that they have to start this process all over again. So something that you should be sensitive to if foreign nationals are in this process and they're looking to move, even if maybe there's a better geography from your perspective, there's more available housing, there's a better pricing that you can get. Moving from Central Valley, for example, to the Bay Area or vice versa could restart their green card process. So just something for you to keep in mind. This second stage of the process, the I-140, this is kind of the goal of a lot of foreign nationals, because again, when they complete this second step, that's when they can renew their H-1B forever. They no longer have to worry about running out of time and having to leave the country. And you know, their kids pulling them out of school, they're good once they get this I-140 approval notice, and they have some flexibility now to change employers and still keep their place in line for the green card, which is great. This very last stage of the process, this is what's commonly known as the actual green card application. But to get through stages 1 and 2, and to arrive at stage 3 depends on a lot of factors, primarily on the person's country of birth. We have in the U.S. immigration system for green cards, we only have 140,000 green cards that can be approved on the employment-based side for every fiscal year. And that 140,000 is divided by every country in the world and then divided by preference category, with the very elite PhD candidates, Nobel Prize winners that I mentioned. That's the employment-based first preference, or EB1, spread out over 5 different categories. And if there's more people in that category than there are numbers available, a backlog is created. So I just put in just a sample of this next month's visa bulletin so you can see what that backlog looks like. So this is country of birth, not country of citizenship. So if you just look at India, for example, and let me just explain really quickly. So all chargeability is every other country that's not listed out separately. And the reason that these other countries are listed out separately is because consistently there are more applicants than there are numbers available, and that's where the line starts to back up. So these countries are segregated out from every other country in the world. And if you look at India on this employment-based section of the visa bulletin, if they started the green card process, so stage 1 here, that perm, if they started that process any later than July of 2009, under the EB2 category, which is the most popular category, they cannot proceed to stage 3 of the green card. There are predictions that for this visa bulletin to move in time, it could take someone 20 plus years to just get to stage 3 of the green card process. So it's very, very critical to them that nothing disrupts their immigration so that they don't have to start the process over again. So that may be surprising to some of you of how long it actually could take. But you see in some of these boxes, there's the letter C, meaning they're current. So let's say that I was born in Mexico and I'm a Nobel Prize winner. I'm that, very first preference. There's not an oversubscription to that. It's current, meaning I can go directly, we look at this process flow again, from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 with no waiting periods in between. I'm current, the date is current, I can move through. So that doesn't happen too often in the Bay Area. We primarily have most foreign nationals from India and China in the employment-based categories, and you can see how that plays out here with the backlogs, sometimes taking over 10 years, and there's not a real-time movement. It doesn't move ahead 1 month every month. Sometimes, in fact, it goes backwards, which is why those predictions are saying it could take even more than 20 years to do that. I know I'm running a little bit short on time, but just a couple of things I wanted to highlight for you here is that whenever someone is here in the United States, and let's take the H-1B for an example, they're doing an H-1, it's good for 3 years at a time, but then they have to extend it. They have to go through the whole process again with the Immigration Service. And we have seen over the last few years an extraordinary number of challenges to these petitions called requests for evidence, or RFE, which sometimes even lead to a denial. If that H-1B petition is denied, the employee has to leave the United States right away. There is no grace period. There is not a whole lot of option for appeal, at least not in a quick manner. Sometimes companies can come up with solutions. Fragaman does work with them to say, maybe we refile the case, maybe there's another option. But this is why it's a very tenuous time for foreign nationals to be here in the US. And sometimes people are going to be hesitant about, investing in a home at this point until they're at least far enough in the green card process to be a little bit more solid. When I was talking to some of our attorneys on my team about this, she's a US citizen, her husband was a foreign national, and she had some great stories saying when, he couldn't get approved for a refinancing loan because his green card was only a conditional green card. When you marry a US citizen and you've been married for less than 2 years, when you apply for the green card, you only get a conditional green card. So he needed co-signers on loans to be able to move things through. In his experience, it was affecting his ability to get the best loan possible, higher down payment requirements, higher interest rates, and it's super frustrating for foreign nationals that are in that part of the process. But one of the things that we've done to be able to help at the request of our client for the companies is we've been able to provide just a proof of status letter for the lender, so that they can understand that someone, while it looks like their status will expire maybe even next year, we explain that although the current status is only valid until next year, we can extend that. Sometimes we can say we can extend that indefinitely. We can call out that permanent residency is being pursued, and that is going to allow additional extensions on the H-1B forever until permanent residency is approved. And this has helped. So know that that's something that you can raise if you're having any trouble kind of getting paperwork through. We've been told by foreign nationals that this letter has certainly helped, at least to explain to the underwriters what their status means and what kind of longevity they can have here in the United States. I'm happy to take any questions, but I did want to, and again, you'll have these, but one thing that whenever I get a crowd in front of me, I always want to say is, everybody usually refers to everything as a visa. This, and yes, that's Ryan Gosling, is a sample visa stamp, and that is the only thing that should be referred to as a visa. It's a travel document. It's issued outside of the United States by a consular officer, but that's the only thing that's a visa. Your foreign nationals will have a passport document from their home country allowing them to travel, and they will have an approval notice that will have their status. It's the work permit or the status document, and this is an I-94 that controls their status. So if you ever see documents, I wanted you to just at least be familiar with what they're called and what they are. But again, everybody always calls everything a visa, and know that the only thing that is a visa really is that travel document. So I'll go ahead and I'll pause there, and happy to take any questions. Like I said, this was kind of a whirlwind discussion. Happy to come back if people are interested and discuss this more, but happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Before we get to questions, I wanted to share one thing real quick that just did not make it into the slides. And can you see my screen? So this is something that that was provided to us by Cal Financial, and what it is it's a list of all the visa classes, so many of them that Christy mentioned, whether they're eligible, a brief description, and the documentation that's required for them. So we are going to be sending that out as a handout, so you'll have kind of a point of reference. So don't freak out about it, but I thought it was a really neat opportunity to have something there. So Marilla, I'm so sorry, question, you had a question for Christy.
I'm gonna post it in the chat real quick.
Okay, perfect. So Christy,
can I share something on that form that I shared with everyone?
Yeah, please do, please do.
Okay, so that's just Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's guidelines, and they only lend up to the county conforming limit, which is 765 this year. Jumbo typically tends to follow those same rules, although recently they have been cutting back on or increasing down payment requirements for people with work visas. So that's going to get you conforming loans. On Jumbo, they're going to be pretty close, probably 25, sometimes even 30% down requirements, where conforming is only 5%. So just something to look out for if you're looking at jumbo loans, because that's typically what our market is. So.
Thank you so much for that, Daniel. One question that I had while I was listening to this is, Christy, that you mentioned that the letter can help clarify the status for lenders, and I wanted to know if you or Daniel could speak on this. Is that up to the discretion of each bank? Is there any sort of guideline that says what is and isn't accepted?
It's up to the bank, yeah. So for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all of the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac lenders are going to follow their guidelines. So no matter who you go to, they're ultimately going to follow that sheet that I gave you. But yeah, when you get into jumbo, it is up to the bank. So like Citibank is going to be more favorable than say a Wells Fargo or a Chase visas. That's just their niche. I mean, we have a bank called Advantial that will anybody that is on a working visa, but they require 25% down and the rate's higher. So it really just kind of depends on, you know, how, I guess, rate sensitive the client is and how much money they actually have down to actually place them in the right bank per se.
Thank you so much for that. Christy, we have a question for you. Sorry, Daniel, were you going to say something else?
Oh, no, that's it.
Sorry. Christy, we have a question for you that Morella wants to know what the basic difference between EB2 and an EB3 is.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a big question from the foreign nationals that we work with too. So EB2 just stands for the employment-based second preference, EB3 for employment-based third preference. The higher the preference category, typically the faster you will get your green card. So everyone is trying to get the highest category possible. And what defines those categories is by the minimum requirements for the job. And that comes from the company. So if the company says the minimum requirement for the position is a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience or higher, or its equivalent, which is a master's degree and 2 years of experience, you get put in the EB2 category. If the requirements for the job are any less than that, so more entry-level positions, less than a bachelor's plus 5, then the case gets put into the EB3 category, which, as you could see, the difference could be, you know, years between how quickly you get your green card. The employment-based first preference, or the EB1, the people who qualify at that level get to skip that perm process altogether. So instead of a 3-step green card process, it's only a 2-step green card process, which is why everybody wants EB1, because it's a much faster way to get the green card.
Thank you. I know I've had lots of conversations with people and they've said, well, at least I'm EB1 now. It was EB2 before. And I was like, that sounds awful. That doesn't sound like any progress at all. But it is. I mean, it's an enormous amount of different. So I have a question here in the chat, and I think it might be a little bit very real estate specific, but I'm going to ask it. So whoever is a broker here can jump in if they have a really great answer. They have a client in contract with new construction. The client is worried about COVID and wanted to walk away and get their deposit back. And they're not able to, and they wanted to know if there's any recourse. The new construction, I guess, is only going to give it back if there is a job loss. So I guess that what that addresses is there is a very imminent threat that a lot of people face, that it's not just that whether they have a job or don't have a job, it's what could happen very quickly in the future. And Christy, I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's a big concern of foreign nationals right now. So it's not just the travel concerns of COVID, but, you know, companies are not doing as well as they had. And a lot of, you know, sectors, our biomed clients are doing great right now. Amazon is doing great right now, but there's a lot of companies that are downsizing. And so from a foreign national perspective, if you lose your job, and again, let's take the most common category, which is the H-1B, the government gives you a 60-day grace period to get another job. So if they're terminated, you know, on August 1st, they have all of August and all of September to find another employer to file just what's called an H-1B transfer. The foreign national doesn't have to wait for an approval to start with the new employer. As soon as that new petition is filed, they can start working for the new employer, but there is that 60-day period. If companies don't give a notice period of the termination, it's not a whole lot of time to find a new job. A lot of our clients that we've seen, they'll give foreign nationals a 60-day notice period. Then they have an additional 60-day grace period to try and find another job. And that seems to be more realistic. But that's one important thing for you to know from a client perspective as you're talking to them, that if they do lose their job, it's not like they're out of the country immediately. They do have a couple of months to find another employer. I don't know if that, you know, assuages any anxiety. It's not much, but at least it's a little bit that, you know, you can suggest and say, well, if you know, start looking for a job right away, you have 60 days to be able to do it. It's not much though.
No, thank you. That's really helpful to know. So if somebody says to you that, you know, I'm in this position, you kind of have an idea of what their timelines are going to be. Daniel, I wanted to ask you if that was a situation that was happening while someone was under contract, and let's say that they, you know, found another job and it was a pretty lateral shift, similar income, would that transaction survive?
Yeah, if the client's paid on a salary, it's really easy because they're guaranteed, you know, a set amount of pay, and we just need to receive one pay stub from the new job before we could close. If they switch to like an hourly employee, then you do have to work hourly for 12 months. So that could potentially, you know, blow up a transaction. Yeah, but as long as their salary, it's, you know, pretty straightforward. The other thing I see a lot for, you know, people with H-1B visas, because that's the most common thing, is they're working at these tech companies and they're receiving RSUs, so restricted stock units, as income. And if they haven't had a history of it, or if they haven't got any, you know, vesting of stocks from the new company, there could be that lapse in between where there is no RSUs granted to them, and then we can no longer use that income. So it's, if they're using RSUs, it could get tricky, but otherwise it's salary's fine.
That's really helpful because so many people are, and they're watching them very closely.
RSUs are huge. I almost would say every single tech employee that we do a loan for that has an H-1B visa gets RSUs.
Definitely. And if that's not, you know, related to our committee, but, you know, educate yourself on that if you want to service your clients well. Chrissy, I had a question for you, and that is, can you talk about what sort of costs individuals incur and companies incur for, I mean, let's talk about H-1B visas, which are, or the related spouse visas, which are the most common. And if there is if you see an increase in costs because of the June policy change.
So by regulation, foreign nationals cannot pay for their own H-1B. Nor can they pay for that first step of the green card for a couple of different reasons. On the H-1B front, the reason that they can't pay for it themselves is because there are prevailing wage requirements that the employer has to attest to pay. So they have to pay, they have to promise to pay at least the wage that their US workers are getting for a similar job. And so if you have the foreign national pay for any part of the immigration, that reduces their total compensation. So the government just says, to be clean, no, the foreign national can't pay for that. You don't want that to be affecting prevailing wage requirements. So the companies have to pay for that. On the green card, for that first step of the process that we talked about, the perm, I said the companies have to search for able, willing, and qualified US workers, and only if they can't find any can they proceed. The government feels like if the foreign national is paying for that, it taints the process and it makes it not a true test of the labor market, so they can't pay for that either. So for the most part, even in the other visa categories, companies always pay both the legal fees and the filing fees for the principal worker, for the actual employee. I would say it's about a 50-50 split on who has to pay for the spouse's work permit. Most companies will pay for the spouse's paperwork to get status to be here. But for the work permit, the foreign national has to pay for that, him or herself. And so the fees going up on the H-1B will not affect your clients because that's something that the company has to pay. Although if it is $100,000 per petition, I don't think they'll be extending everybody's work permit just from a fiscal perspective. They won't be able to afford it. Although it depends on the company. I had one of our, Fortune 200 clients tell me last week, let me know when you hear how much it's going to be. We couldn't survive without foreign nationals in this industry. We'll have to figure out where to get the budget to do that. So, but for the spouse's work permit, I believe the filing fees are $560. And that's something that they can do on their own. They could engage a lawyer to do that as well. The H-1B filing fees right now are about $3,500, and legal fees are all over the board depending on kind of if you get a la carte or full service for those, but the employers do take care of that by and large.
Thank you so much, Christy. I mean, this is just a phenomenal wealth of information, and I think a lot of us are probably going to be revisiting the video and the slides a few times as these things come up, and just to process and digest it all. There was a question from James Endo for Dan, and we're going to make that the last question so we can wrap up. And that is, what do you see as the biggest red flags for qualified foreign national borrowers? And what do we need to know to help manage drama? So 1 minute or less, that's for you, Dan.
Biggest concern is down payment. We can no longer do 10% down for foreign national buyers. It really down payment. I mean, just expect larger down payments, at least 20%, some cases 25.
All right. If you think of any other questions, please post them in chat, and we'll try to get to them a little bit later. So Celsa, back to you.
Thank you. Well, it is my honor to introduce Teresa Castellanos. Did I just lose everybody?
We're here. We're here.
Oh, I don't know what just happened. I can't get out of my screen here. I apologize. Here we go. Thank you. So it is my honor to introduce Teresa Castellanos. Teresa is with the County of Santa Clara Office of Immigrant Relations. She comes with a vast background of over 30 years of immigrant services. She currently has a focus on community and staff education, research, and resource development, just to name a few. She's a very busy woman, and we are so lucky to have her here with us today. Teresa, thank you for educating us on a topic we all should be informed on. I'm going to go ahead and ask Connor to pull up her slides for her. And Teresa, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm going to talk really fast because there's a lot of information here. So
Okay,
next slide. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk quickly about demographics, understanding what's changed in the immigration landscape, who is impacted. Can you hear me? Yes, everyone can hear me. And immigrant issues and COVID-19. Next. So I'm from the Office of Immigrant Relations. We were created in 2015, although I worked for the county for 23 years. I was a part of a department first, and then we became our own standalone office. We promote effective immigrant community preparedness, whatever the situation is, assisting community education to minimize fraudulent service provision, and centralize and coordinate immigrant integration services. We currently fund about $4.6 million in immigration legal services. Next. So in California, we are the state with the largest immigrant community. We are the state with the largest undocumented community, and we are the state with the largest DACA community. So that's why we are leading in this nation when it comes to immigration, because we have the largest population of every immigrant community in California. So when you look at our undocumented population in particular, the major areas that they are coming from are Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Philippines, India, China, South Korea, Vietnam, and others. Obviously, every country that has people that come to visit the United States has an undocumented population, and people become undocumented in many ways, not just the people who run across the border, but the people who come on a tourist visa, decide to stay, people who come on a fiancé visa and decide not to get married, people who are H-1Bs and get laid off and don't find a job in 2 months or less, end up becoming undocumented. So it is something that is fluid, something that many people have to deal with. And I have in the past taught immigrant leadership courses, and I would say of all the issues in the diversity of the immigrant community, the one that everyone has across the board is an undocumented population. But our media likes to focus on only one country in particular having, or one group of people being the only ones that are undocumented. Not true. Next. So in Santa Clara County, when you look at our immigrant population, it's coming, the 10 largest sending countries are Mexico, India, Vietnam, China, Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, Iran, Japan, and Russia. But in the last 2 or 3 years, India and Vietnam have like pushed up to the top. Next. So when you look at Santa Clara County in particular, we are the county with the largest immigrant population in the whole state of California. Not the largest in numbers, but the largest in percentage. We beat LA County every so often, and then sometimes we jump back to number 2 and number 1, and we keep trading places. But in Santa Clara County, a little bit over 38% of the population is immigrant. That's almost 40% of the population is immigrant. And if we count their children, 60% of the population in Santa Clara County is immigrant, if we're counting immigrants and their children. And then when you look at the immigrant population, 62% of the immigrant population in Santa Clara County is Asian. 27% is Latino, and 8% is European. So I'm going to tell you again, 62% is Asian. 62% is Asian. And I keep bringing it up because even for us who live in Santa Clara County and live with so much diversity, when we think immigrants, a lot of the times we're thinking Mexican or Latino. And 62% of the immigrant population is Asian. And that's in all the diversity of what is Asia. So we're talking about at least 40 different languages, at least 40 different countries of origin. And so what does that mean on the other side for Latin Americans in Santa Clara County? It means that 75% is our US citizens. So next. So when we look at the undocumented population in particular in the undocumented experience pre-2016, people had PTSD, people faced racial profiling, people had difficulty understanding US culture and institutions, people had a lack of awareness of the healthcare system and how it supports. People did not feel acknowledged and supported. Healthcare institutions had difficulty discussing immigration effects on childhood development and mental health. So this was pre-2016. Next. Now we have post-2016, and what we're seeing in the current context is that immigration law, number 1, has not changed. Immigration practices by the government have changed. And through executive orders, administrative changes, changes on the rules, changes of the role of judges, the immigration landscape has changed a lot. So we're seeing that there's extreme fear in the community, extreme levels of stress, and that there were constant legal battles saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Just look at DACA. I think DACA has been in the courts maybe 11 times in 3 years. So that's a lot of times that people are feeling the weight of the fear of what's going to happen now. What does my future hold? What is this judge going to decide? Next. So what we've seen is continuous change to policies and processes and programs that impact the immigrant community. Among those policy changes, we see an increase in the ability to place people in deportations, holding people longer, increase in fees, limit fee waivers, limit access to the federal safety net, close administrative doors for relief, limit access to asylum seekers and refugee seekers, limit human rights protections, continuously trying to end DACA, the travel ban, and so on. And so there's been a lot of impact, and all of this impact is pre-COVID. And I would say that what this administration has been really good is in their consistency. They do not let go, and they keep going and going and going in the communities that they are focused on. Next. So among these changes, we see the family separation continues, the HUD proposal to evict mixed status families. There was a national emergency declared for border funding, border spelled wrong. Public charge changes are consistently taking place. And what we've seen is not only the targeting of illegal immigration, but also the targeting of legal immigration. So it has not limited itself to a certain type of immigrant. It is now targeting all immigrants. Next. So as I mentioned already, no changes in immigration law, but the doors are being administratively closed. So we're making it easier to deport people, making it harder for people to adjust their status, making it more difficult for people to enter the country, and so on. Next. And there's a lot of effects of immigration policies on mental health. As a community, you feel that you are scapegoated on a regular basis, that you are targeted. And I would say that the stress is not only being felt by the Latino community, it is felt by the whole immigrant community. There's an increase in immigration enforcement, detention, and deportation. A 2015 study found that fear of ICE enforcement is the greatest stressor that exists for children in the United States. And obviously toxic stress. Next. So one of the issues that we have been dealing with, and there was a big change yesterday, is the issue of public charge. So public charge is a test in immigration law to decide whether certain immigrants will be a financial burden on the government. Because of the public charge rule, some immigrants worry that their immigration status can hurt by getting certain government benefits. And so they are specific. There's a list of 2 government benefits that was extended by former government benefits and 6 specific government benefits that could impact your immigration status or future immigration status. But everybody thinks that it applies to everything. And so what we have seen, for example, is immigrant parents taking their kids off free and reduced school lunches because they think there's going to be an immigration consequence. It's not true, but that's the fear. We've also seen parents take their kids off food stamps and welfare because, again, they think it's going to have an immigration consequence. Not true, but that is what everyone perceives. And I've been even in the situation when Trump was first elected that people started asking me, well, I'm receiving a free food box. Is that going to impact me? No, it's not going to impact you, but everyone's afraid. Next. Everyone's afraid of everything. And so public charge is very narrow. It impacts people the first time they're entering the country. It impacts people the first time they're getting a permanent green card. So maybe they're H-1B and getting the permanent green card for the first time. Or it impacts legal permanent residents if they leave the country for more than 6 months without permission, because then the federal government has the right to evaluate you again. Will you be a public charge? And as legal permanent residents, you're not supposed to leave the country for more than 6 months because you're given residency under the condition that you live and work here. And if you leave for more than 6 months, you risk your residency. So most immigrants who face a public charge test don't get the benefits that are an issue. And I'm not going to go into big detail about public charge because that's not what this focus is. I'm just mentioning it. So next. So important factors to remember is that the public charge rule does not apply to all immigrants. The public charge rule does not apply to many public benefits. And the public charge rule only looks at the benefits you get for yourself. So there were like 7 different versions of this that was released. And in the different versions that were released, Head Start was on it, free and reduced school lunches. And so people have read or heard about different versions and they think, well, this is going to impact me. And no, that's not the case. It ended up being a very narrow rule. And the announcement that was made yesterday was that there is now a court injunction in expanding the rule. So historically, the only thing that impacted you was receiving funds from the federal government or receiving long distance health institutionalization from the federal government. And then they expanded it with 4 more issues. But right now there's a court injunction, so that's not moving forward. Next. So when we are talking about the most vulnerable population that is being impacted by the current anti-immigrant debate, who are we talking about? Next. We are talking about the first generation, the second generation, children in mixed status, immigrant families. We are talking about children in particular. This is who is being impacted, is US citizen children who are being relegated to a second class form of citizenship because of who their parents are. Next. So there has been a national debate on this topic, and there's been national studies where children as young as 5 years old are already thinking about deportation and what they're going to do when their parents get deported. And for many children, that's not something that could even happen to them, but it's such a part of a conversation that in the national studies that have been done, the kids are making plans for what am I going to do. So one little boy in North Carolina was writing a list, and the counselor asked him what he was doing, and he said he was writing down what he knew how to cook, which was peanut butter sandwiches and cheese sandwiches, in order to reassure his frightened 5-year-old sister that they would be okay if the parents were deported. And then another one that's over here in the corner, a Head Start teacher at Pennsylvania, talked about how one of the 4-year-olds in her class was saying that Trump was going to deport her mother back to Mexico, and her mother was not from Mexico. So the point of this is that children are being impacted in ways that we can't even imagine. And even when they, in quotes, were not being targeted, they are feeling the impact. Next. So in the COVID-19 era, there have been, and I'm going to tell you, 48 executive actions on immigration during this COVID era. 48 is a lot, and he has been doing a lot. I mean, I create these presentations that I have to change like 2 days later because there's always a new announcement of what has changed. So there have been 48 as of 2 weeks executive orders in the context of COVID. And they have impacted the asylum ban, the reentry, suspending reentry for refugees, regarding placement restrictions for unaccompanied alien children. Hearings are postponed, suspension of legal immigration, suspension of visa appointments, the closure of USCIS offices. I think there was a news article today that, oh, I don't remember, but many people are not going to be able to become citizens before the election because of the backlog that's being created. We do expect that USCIS staff, which is the immigration staff, will start to be beginning furloughed in August, which means everything that was already delayed is going to be way more backlogged. Next. In terms of COVID, we know that 12 million immigrants are the hardest hit by the crisis. 6 million are in the front lines, and 6 million work in industries facing layoffs due to COVID. Next. So when we look at who's working where, in terms of the immigrant community, 22% of the nursing assistants are immigrants, 25% of personal care aides are immigrants, 29% of the physicians that we all have are immigrants, and 38% of the home health aides are immigrants. Next. Next. Oh, sorry. It looked too much like the last one. And when we look at the biggest impacted industries currently, we see that 26% of the population working in manufacturing are immigrants, 27% working in agriculture are immigrants, 34% of the people working in transportation are immigrants, and 22% of our scientific research and development are immigrants. Next. So because of the fear that has been promoted so much in the last 3 years, the government knew that when the COVID-19 announcement came out, that they would have to make special rules so that people would access services. And so they have made a public statement that if you use any of the COVID services, that will not be used against you, will not be a public charge issue, and that immigrants should seek care if they think that they are sick. Next. So some of the programs that are safe in the COVID area are social insurance programs based on work history that are not means tested. That includes unemployment insurance benefits, state disability, paid leave, Social Security disability insurance, and Social Security retirement, and Medicare. And so we have to mention what people qualify, because they are so terrified that they think they don't qualify for anything and that there will be immigration consequences to things when that really is not the truth. Next. So quickly, I'm going to talk about Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was initiated by President Obama. It gave undocumented young people from the ages of 16 to 30 temporary status. It gave them a work permit, a driver's license, education, for access to education in higher ed, and relief from deportation. What we know about this population is that 70% has a BA or more, 98% speaks a language other than English in addition to, and that 90% of this population is currently employed. Next. So there have been many court rulings in this arena. I kind of think that there's been like 9 or 11 of them. And so June 2020, there were no new applications. The Supreme Court heard the DACA issue in November 2020. A decision was announced, oh, that's supposed to be November 2019. And a decision was announced in June of this year. We were all surprised when it was not ended. Very surprised. We were getting ready for the worst. And I think for that impacted community, the stress was so heavy. And then that announcement came, and so it was a victory. Next. But as of this week, there is new announcements in this context again. And so the way the administration is interpreting it is that the Supreme Court ruled that they may consider the problem anew, and that while they are doing so, they can issue a new intervening memo to limit the program until they finish reviewing the whole program. So what they announced this week or last week, I can't even remember anymore what week it was, that all new DACA applications will be rejected. And what we're talking about is high school students, because those are the only people that can apply for DACA right now are high school students. So they are purposely targeting high school students. And we've had 2 high school graduating classes that graduated without DACA. So this year was the second graduating class. That renewals will be considered on a case-by-case basis, but if granted, will only be issued a renewal for 1 year instead of 2, and that advanced parole can only take place in almost all applications will be rejected except emergencies. Next. So we know it's about 300,000 youth that are impacted. And as I mentioned, they are all high schoolers because they're the young people who couldn't apply for DACA before he stopped it. So they were in high school when this happened, or they're like 14-year-olds turning into 15 or 16-year-olds that would have qualified. He is making it easier to end the program. And in limiting the number of years that this program exists, instead of having to transition between 2 years, you transition between 1 year to end the program. And as we see it, as people who work on this topic, he is limiting what he feels he needs to follow through with in terms of the Supreme Court. And he is ignoring the Maryland District Court by rejecting initial applications and rejecting advanced parole applications, because the courts have already weighed in and said, this is what you need to do. And the administration has said no. Next. So here I will end with words of a focus group that we did with DACA applicants about a year ago. And we just asked them to talk about what it was like to have DACA and to be a DACA recipient and what it meant. And so this were some of the things that they said. They said DACA is empowering and disempowering. I am more than DACA. DACA triggers anti-immigrant sentiment. DACA has given me a certain level of confidence. Under the current situation, I am going day by day. Our only newsworthiness is our trauma, and we are still here. So that is my very rushed presentation.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions for you, Teresa? Okay. One thing that I wanted to ask you is, one of the intentions that a lot of people brought were they wanted to be able to, we're real estate agents, we're problem solvers, we want to help our clients, what can we do? So is there anything that you can share that, if someone is struggling, they're uncertain, what resources would you point them to?
I would say that in Santa Clara County, we are blessed. We have been investing in immigrant integration for like 30 years. So there's a lot of programs that exist here. There's a lot of support that exists here. One thing that does surprise me that we don't have, that every other surrounding county has, and I'm going to complain about it right now, is that we don't have an UNDOCUMENTED. Salinas has an UNDOCUMENTED. San Francisco has an UNDOCUMENTED. Napa has an UNDOCUMENTED. And in the heart of Silicon Valley, we don't have an UNDOCUMENTED. I don't know what's happening, but it's a big deal. I would say that this crisis, no matter what, you are on unstable ground. And what this crisis has done is put you more in instability. And if we're talking about the undocumented community in particular, we are going on month 4. The state of California did invest money, but if you were lucky, you got $500 for an individual to $1,000 once. It is not by accident that essential workers are immigrants. The structure is set up that way. When this spreads among our undocumented community that's picking our food, we are in trouble. This undocumented community also cooks all our food that we eat, and they deliver all our food that we eat, and they make all the food that we eat, and they're the truck drivers that move the food. We need to step up more as the state of California. 40% of our staff, and I'm just talking about the undocumented. What if we talk about all the doctors and all the nurses and everyone that's working in healthcare? There is no way to survive this pandemic without the immigrant community. We need to take care of the immigrant community because we are benefiting from the immigrant community in every form possible. Add to that, they are the parents of US citizen children. And if you've only got money once, $500 or $1,000 in 4 months, how are you not gonna go to work? And how are you going to decide to be tested if you know that being tested means you can't go to work to feed your family? So I would say we need to expand this conversation way more than what's taking place. And we need to get involved because our lives depend on this.
Thank you, Teresa. That is a powerful note and a powerful message. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here and rushing through your presentation as it was phenomenal. Thank you so much. If there are no questions for Teresa, I'd like to move on to the final leg of our
Did we lose Shivangi?
Maybe give it a minute.
Let me let her know.
The window's still showing.
I guess while we're waiting. Oh, thank you, Teresa. Yeah, I was going to say like what links or what websites we can like provide to anyone we know that's undocumented to like help them out to find more resources.
Sorry, guys. My Zoom just crashed. That has never happened before, but naturally it happened today. I heard a question. Who was that question for? I don't know who was speaking. I just got back.
I think it was for Teresa. I think it was for Teresa.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
She was asking what resources or websites she could provide to people.
I'm typing them into the chat as quickly as I can.
Perfect. Thank you.
But I'm gonna include our office website. It includes so many materials, and I also included immigrant info. It also includes a lot of materials.
I know when I was visiting there earlier, I found a ton of information. So
Yeah.
please do check the chat and visit that. So, you know, I know we just kind of tried to drink from a fire hose right now, everyone. And it was a deep, deep well of information. But what it comes down to is now that we know what those challenges are, now that we know that there are legal obstacles, there are anxieties, there are uncertainties, there are economic challenges, how do we apply that knowledge into our business and have better conversations? How do we serve our clients more empathetically? And so I'm going to start with the John Lewis quote because I spent some time this morning watching the funeral, and someone that I respect greatly. If you come together with a mission and it's grounded with love and a sense of community, you can make the impossible possible. So here we are, people that service the community. And when we think about how we apply this information, I want us to think of immigration. You know, we've covered the legal aspects, but we've also talked about some of the cultural aspects. What makes someone an immigrant? There's language, culture, values, religion. There is a very strong sense of communities within a lot of immigration communities. And at the same time, there's no monolith. There's no, you know, this is something that applies to all immigrants, or this is something that applies to all Chinese immigrants or Indian immigrants or Latino immigrants. So, and I want there to be, when you have conversations, a sense of confidence, because if you're uncomfortable with it, either, and I know this because I'm a buyer's agent and I do this every day, if you have one person that is asking you, you know, hey, I have this complicated situation, and you're waiting to call that person back because you're just so uncomfortable with this, or somebody shares something with you and you just don't know how to address it, your discomfort is going to create discomfort there. If when these topics are broached, you don't create a space to engage, if you don't come from, you know, interest and having a little bit of knowledge, there's not going to be a space. You may not even know the anxieties that some people are facing. I reached out to a lot of top agents and asked them, you know, what sort of experiences have you had in transactions with immigrants? And everyone was like, nothing really. So, you know, that could be partly because it was all very smooth, or it could partly be because if you don't create that space, you might not see the full picture of someone. And lastly, to just sort of integrate this into your own business practices. So Connor, if you wouldn't mind, can we go on to video mode?
Can I just make a really quick comment? Sorry to interrupt, but I would say the day that we started distributing that California fund, there was one phone number for the Bay Area. They got 2.5 million phone calls in 2 days. That's how big the desperation was. And they were so desperate, people trying to get through this line to apply for that one-time funding, that people started calling the surrounding agencies to say, you lied to me, this doesn't really exist. Some moms started saying it would be easier to commit suicide. And other moms started saying, I am so frustrated, I want to beat my children up. And I would say, okay, so maybe moms say that occasionally, because it's really hard to be a mom, but that you're telling another source that has to report to me was that there was a lot of desperation and there's a lot of hunger, and we are looking away way too much.
Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, I think that once we start talking about who our community is and knowing what, you know, some of what we've learned today, it really begins with empathy. Approaching conversations with empathy and realizing that these things, if it's not someone you're talking to, if they are part of an immigrant community or their family member is, someone is going through this, even if it isn't them themselves. This is something that's on their mind. It's on all of our minds. It really is. I worry about a lot of my friends. If I wanted to just kind of share some of my the practices that I use. One sec. And I wanted to open a conversation because I really want you guys to sort of connect. So one thing, you know, I mentioned the Unruh Civil Rights Act in the beginning, and that is to say that you can't ask your clients, hey, are you an immigrant? It is a protected class in California, but what you can do is be compassionate enough that they want to share something personal about themselves, because not everyone, with everything that's going on, not everyone's going to feel comfortable sharing their specific immigration statuses. So I just wanted to share a couple of examples of things that I use in my business, and see if anyone has, you know, any questions. So one thing that I think is a really important tip is when you have these conversations, when you insert these certain types of questions, you're not doing it when you see a person that you suspect might be an immigrant. It's a way of having dialogue with everyone. So has anyone ever asked a buyer or seller, are you a first-time home buyer? Are you a first-time home seller? I'm imagining that that's like everyone, right? That's a really good question to have in your in your consults if you're not. One thing that I changed recently is asking clients, are you a first-time home buyer in America? Are you a first-time home buyer or a first-time home seller in America? And the thing is that if your client is, you know, not an immigrant, they're going to say yes or no. And if your client is an immigrant, you're projecting a sense of openness that you can ask them. There are a lot of cultural things. One thing that I like to ask at listing presentations is there anything that's unwelcome in your home? So that could be, I have a client that, you know, I remember like showing her a house, and the stove was a mess, and she was like, don't worry about it. I'm going to replace the stove wherever we buy, because they're strict vegetarians and meat does not cross their thresholds. And there's no way that they're cooking dinner on a stove that's had meat cooked in it in the past. So, you know, you don't know this when you ask that question. You don't know, maybe they're observant Jewish, maybe they're not observant. So if you're asking some people and not others, I think that's where the issues arise. But it's a really good practice. Is there anything that's unwelcome in your home? So it might just be a vegan, they don't like it. You know, in certain religions, shoes in certain cultures, you know, they want shoes in there. But by doing having those conversations, you sort of open up the dialogue. And once you're someone who is open, you get more information. I'm working with a lovely Iranian couple right now, and in the past, you know, when I'm thinking about a closing gift that I might be giving, and it's, you know, if it's guys, I'll ask, hey, are you more of a beer guy or a wine guy? Because maybe that's something that I want to include in the closing gift. Not everyone drinks, and that can be something related to culture, or it could be something not related to culture. And so a really great question is, you know, the reason that I don't have these up in slides is because it's really important for it to be authentic and built into and integrated into your business. So, you know, when we hit a milestone, I'm going to ask them, what are we toasting with tonight? Because that fits into how I ask. And, you know, you can say, is it champagne or sparkling cider? And it's open-ended. And if they choose to share, they can. The point is that you're not othering the person. You're not saying, hey, because you look different from me, can I ask you this? And as I said, you know, when you feel awkward about something, you're creating that awkwardness, and that does not build really strong relationships. So I just wanted to ask you, what sort of things have you come against in having these conversations that, you know, you think will help you, or what questions do you have?
Hi, Shivangi.
Hi, Janakiram, go ahead.
You know, how we should respond to the question of H-1B? So, you know, losing a job, moving back, how do they manage their property after buying?
Yeah, so I mean, in this scenario, has the person told you that this is something I'm worried about, or is this something
Yes.
that you? Okay. Does anyone want to step in? I mean, these are you know, complicated conversations. I know that I've had conversations with my friends who've said that, you know, we can purchase a house for a lot more than we're willing to purchase for, because we want rentability, and we want that, you know, we want something of an exit strategy, because if we're in that position, that's something that they have a contingency plan for in their lives. I had clients that bought an investment property, moved to Canada because it helped their visa situation, and paid a lot more, you know, down payment, and had worse rates because it was an investment property before they came back. But I mean, I think Janakiram,
This is a reality plan. They should have a plan for that, because, you know, there comes a time they lose the job, like, you know, Christy was explaining. You have to have a plan. You go ahead and buy the house. You lose the job. You can't stay here, so you have to go back. You know, what is my plan for managing it, paying the mortgage, and they want to rent it, you know, for a while until you know, figure out what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not the expert here. I'm just a facilitator. But I think that that's going to be property managed like any other property manager. I mean, there are lots of landowners that live abroad. They just have to, when they sell, if they're not here, they'd have to follow the FERPTA guidelines, which are for non-resident sellers. But I don't know if, I mean, obviously they're going to have to make their mortgage payments, and it's a huge headache, and it's extremely high stress. But I think that mainly what you can do is be knowledgeable and understand the hoops that they're jumping through, and just be there. What I found is that a lot of my clients are extremely savvy. They know what to do. They're doing it, and all they really need from me is understanding, and just serving them in a way that, you know, that acknowledges what they're going through.
Shivangi, if I can chime in, I know we got a lot of information thrown at us today, and when it comes to legal advice, I mean, although realtors, we all want to help our client, we're not lawyers, so just remember to refer them. We had some great slides today with a ton of information just to kind of arm us with the knowledge of what's going on in our clients' lives. So using that information to help guide them in the right direction, I think, is just super key. And then as far as just having conversations with our clients, I think, you know, there was a sheet that we used to give out on our team, and it was like the 50 different types of turbulences that you can run into that will impact your transaction. And I think while you're having that conversation, because I think we all do, to save the transaction and make sure that our client is in the best light possible, that we're incorporating some of the other challenges that could happen. You know, so if legal status is an issue, you're going to find out during that conversation. You need to ask them if they're an immigrant, or if they're, you know, they don't have papers, or what visa they have. It's more of, are there any challenges going on in your personal life right now that could affect your transaction? I want to learn more about you and get to the why of why they're buying a home or why they're selling. And when you learn more about their why and who they are, I think you can really open up those conversations to have safe and secure and make them feel comfortable about talking about those immigration issues with you. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and in the lead conversion phase, I mean, that is the hardest part about real estate. And if that's not the hardest part for you, then congratulations. But for most of us, that lead conversion, building rapport, gaining trust from people is extremely important. And if they don't trust you and you haven't earned their trust by building rapport, they're not going to tell you the real reason that they're saying no. They're going to say, oh, I'm not ready yet. Oh, I'm not interested. And if you're not incorporating this sort of sentiment of compassion, understanding what other things might be, and having conversations in a very culturally sensitive way, then you may never find out what their real reservation is. So I'm gonna see if there's any one last question before we wrap up. Any closing thoughts, comments, feedback? How did we do? Nothing.
I just want to thank everybody for coming.
And thank you everyone for sticking around to the end.
It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Well, we're so glad that you're here for our very first DEI big event. We hope to have more in the future on other topics that are important to our community. And with that, I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your week and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.